What is up, YouTube? Welcome to my home gym. And dude, I'm pretty excited for this video because it's the most underrated arm exercise to help you build up those arms. When I first got into lifting, I would do arms literally every single workout. I just wanted big biceps. I wanted to look good with my shirt off, with a sleeveless shirt. I remember being in high school and seeing kids who had bigger arms or seeing guys that had bigger arms, and I was skinny growing up, so I wanted bigger arms. So that was my goal. And this is one of my favorite exercises to do that. Now, when we think of building arms, the first thing that we typically think of is our biceps, right? And that makes sense because they do make up a big portion of our arms, and we see when people try to work out their arms, a lot of bicep curls, right? That's the big one. And that is a great exercise. I'm a huge bicep curl guy. That's probably one of my favorite exercises. But your biceps actually don't make up the majority of your arms. What makes up the majority of your arms is another muscle, and that's actually the triceps. So that is the muscles on the backs of your arm, and it is split up into three heads. So basically three separate things. It's the lateral head, which is the one out here. It's the medial head, which is right in here, creates that horseshoe look. And then you have the long head, which is here, that runs into your shoulder and is actually responsible partially for shoulder extension, right? So bringing your arm closer to your body. Part of your tricep actually helps out with that. The other main role of the tricep is straightening your arm, right? Extending your arm. So any movement that straightens your arm, like this is my elbow cracks. Holy shit, that hurt. I've been having some elbow issues, probably doing too much triceps. Anyways, any movement that straightens your arm works your triceps. So we want a movement that straightens our arm, but also works that long head a little bit from moving our elbow up and getting some shoulder flexion and extension in that. And one of the best movements for that is going to be the skull crusher. Hey, real quick, number one, I appreciate you a ton for watching this video. You are the best. If you're finding this video helpful, hit that subscribe button and like this video. And also, feel free to download my free fat loss cheat sheet. It has a free workout program with skull crushers included, and it'll put you on my email list so that you always get updates from me and don't miss out. Thanks again, and I appreciate it. Now, the skull crusher is done by laying on your back, okay? You don't actually want to crush your skull. That's not the point of the movement. Please don't do that unless you want to get a concussion and possibly die, which you don't want to do. So the point of the skull crusher is basically just what the movement looks like. Very simply, it's basically just lowering the weights towards your skull, hence skull crusher, and pressing back up towards the ceiling. That's basically it. Remember, we're getting that elbow bend and straightening that elbow, which works the triceps, but also, since I'm bringing my shoulder up into flexion, I'm getting a nice big stretch on that long head. So this is getting work too, because this muscle is working hard right now. I can feel it because since I have the weight in my hand, my arm wants to go back because of gravity. So this tricep is working hard to keep my arm up here as I press up. Let's go over how to first do a skull crusher properly, and then I will go over some different variations that you can do and how I would personally program it. So first, you're going to get your weight. I like to start with dumbbells. They're typically easier on the wrists, on the elbows. They allow more wiggle room, I guess, for lack of a better term, and they allow for a little bit more range of motion. I personally think they're just a lot easier to start off with. So this is what I'm going to demonstrate with. Now, you can start with a bench here, or you can do it from the ground. I actually think maybe from the ground might be a little bit easier to start with. but it really doesn't matter. A bench or the ground are gonna work perfectly. So what you're gonna do is you're going to kick the weight up. So what I like to do is I like to kick my knees up as I lay back down, all right? So I'm keeping the weight close to my body. I'm gonna kick my knees up as I lay down, and then I'm gonna chest press it up towards the ceiling, all right? Now I'm gonna get into my starting position, all right? So palms are actually gonna be facing each other, arms are straight. You'll notice my wrist, elbow, and shoulder are all in a straight line. And from here, I'm gonna think of just dropping the weight next to my ears, okay? Notice, the only thing that's moving is my forearm, all right? I'm not moving my arms at all. And again, remember, we want most of the movement to come from our elbows because that's what our triceps job is. This does not work our triceps as much, right? We're kind of just using a little bit of momentum and our bigger muscles are taking over. So we want the elbow to be the main movement, right? So I'm keeping my shoulders locked and the only thing that's moving are my forearms. So I'm gonna think of just dropping my hands to my ears and I'm gonna press straight back up towards the ceiling. Now, you wanna go down all the way so you get a nice big stretch on that tricep and then press all the way up. If you wanna add a little bit more difficulty to this movement and feel it a little bit more in your triceps, one thing you can do is move your hands back a little bit. Again, we're getting more of a stretch now on that long head. And then same thing, drop your hands next to your elbows. And instead of pressing straight back up towards the ceiling like this, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to press actually back towards the wall behind me. So I'm thinking of pressing my pinkies back towards the wall behind me. And this little slight modification, man, dude, I feel this in my triceps a lot more than I do when I go straight up. So when you're done, how you get rid of this weight is important. It's gonna be a little bit different for each thing you use, but for dumbbells, simply just bring the weight closer to your chest and then kind of tricep extension them down towards the ground like this. Or when they're at your chest, you can just sit up with them if you want and then slowly lower them down to the ground. Now, the next variation is very similar, but instead of using dumbbells, we're gonna use a barbell or an easy bar, which I'll show you the difference in a minute. But the reason being is because we're only gonna be able to lift so much weight with dumbbells, and because your muscles have to work harder to keep them stable, right? With dumbbells, it's not fixed, so your muscles have to work to keep them from moving. So it's a little bit harder, and it's a little bit harder to lift more weight with that. With a barbell, it's one bar, so it's a lot easier to control, it's more stable, and that means we can lift more weight and get stronger. So a barbell is good for once you have the movement down and you need to increase the weight, it's a good variation to use. Now, the problem is with a lot of barbells, especially like this one, it's straight. So when you're going back, you could feel it in your elbows and your wrists a lot more, especially if you're lifting pretty heavy. So for some people, it's not the best option. What I personally like to use instead is this easy bar. And as you can see, there's some grooves in this, or maybe not grooves, but it's curved so that it's a little bit easier on your wrists. All right, so I recommend using an easy bar instead of a barbell. Not to say a barbell is bad, but I've just found that it's a lot easier on the wrists and elbows compared to a barbell. So same thing, we're gonna sit back with it and press up. Now the difference obviously with the barbell compared to the dumbbells is you have this bar now in between your hands. So if you try to bring your hands next to your ears, you're gonna hit your skull, right? And you're actually gonna crush it, okay? So what I like to do here is rather than bring it straight down like this, you know, I like to be safe. I don't like to kind of, you know, risk it for the biscuit. I like to bring it more like back behind my head like this. So I'm still kind of like touching the top of my head. But that way, if I accidentally drop it, it kind of goes towards the ground versus if I drop it here, it's going right towards my fucking forehead and I'm gonna not feel too good. All right. So bring it back behind your head a little bit and same thing, press straight up. And that's basically how you're gonna do it here. There's really two ways that you can do to kind of let go of this weight. I'm kind of lazy. What I like to do is just when I bring it down, just kind of set it on the ground like this. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. It probably won't feel the best on your shoulders. So just kind of bring it down towards your chest, roll it on your belly a little bit, and sit up with it. And then that's the way I would kind of get rid of that weight. Another way that you can variate this, I don't even know if that makes sense, but another variation you can do is doing it on an incline. And what this does is this changes the angle that your triceps are working at. So just go on an incline bench and same thing. You're just going to lower the weight next to your ears and then press straight up. And this will work your triceps a little bit differently. The last variation that you can do is doing cable skull crushers. And the cool thing with a cable is it's going to keep constant tension on the muscles. So when you're using a free weight like a dumbbell or a barbell, your muscles are working the hardest at the bottom because your muscles being stretched. Just like a rubber band, there's a lot of tension in that. You know, when you stretch that thing and then it, boom, comes back together, your muscles work the same way. When you're at the top, your muscles aren't working that hard because your joint is supporting the weight. So your muscle isn't really working that hard at the top. When you're using a cable, that's different. That actually keeps constant tension. So your muscles are working at the bottom and at the top of the movement. So a cable is a great variation. Now, it is a little bit more advanced. So I would start with the dumbbells and the barbell first before going to a cable, but it's definitely a good variation. Now what you're gonna do, you're gonna kind of stand up with it, walk around the bench like so, lay down with it, boom, you're in good position. Again, same thing, elbows stationary in the same spot. I'm only moving my hands to really work my triceps. Now, I like using the rope because I can move my wrist anywhere I want. I can make them wider, I can make them closer, and it's very versatile and it just feels really good. Lastly, let's talk about how you would actually program this. So the way I like to program this would be, I like to have it in phases, all right? So each phase, let's just say it's a month, so 4 weeks. So maybe phase 1, you start with dumbbells. Again, one of the easiest variations, get the movement down. Phase 2, maybe you do a dumbbell with an incline. Maybe you do an incline bench to work that tricep from a different angle. Maybe phase 3, you start using the easy bar on a flat bench. And then phase 4, you do a barbell on an incline bench. And then phase 5, you go ahead and do a cable skull crusher. So each phase, you're still doing the same movement. You're still working the triceps. You're still getting stronger, building muscle, but it's a slight variation to work them a little bit differently. So all of these kind of compound together and add up to build some badass triceps. And then once all those phases are done, you repeat the cycle. Maybe the second time around, instead of doing 12 to 15 reps, you do 6 to 8 reps. Maybe you go a little bit heavier on there to work the triceps a little bit differently, focus more on strength versus muscle building. There's a million different ways you can do this, and that's the fun part because it keeps it interesting. Now if it were me, I would personally probably program these at the end of a workout because it's a single joint movement. It's an isolation movement. So we want to get our big compounds first, right? Like our presses, our barbell bench press, our shoulder press, our rows. So like our pull downs and our dumbbell row. We want to get those first because those work the big muscles. They require the most energy, most technique. And then at the end of the workout, we can focus on this single movement, which is our triceps, right? So I would wait towards the end. And then as a side note too, to build muscle, you probably want to work the triceps at least twice a week. Now, I don't know if I would do a skull crusher twice a week because you don't want to overuse the movement and get like an overuse injury, you know, and get some like elbow and wrist pain. But maybe one day you do your skull crusher variation, the next day, you know, do another tricep variation, and it can be really anything. That's for a different video. But also too, like you're working your triceps in a lot of these compound movements, like your presses, you're lifting a lot of weight with triceps. So I would say focus on your triceps twice a week, lift heavy, go close to failure, focus on good form, and stay consistent with it. And man, you're gonna get some nice results from that.